Looking for a soft, fluffy dinner roll recipe that you can make with your Ankarsrum Assistant? One that will pair nicely with soup, salad, or a meat and potatoes meal? I've got just the recipe for you, Matrimonial Rolls, and I'm going to show you how to use your Ankarsrum Assistant to make them. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm here to help you create your slice of country living wherever you may live. Welcome to Chocolate Box Cottage, the sweet spot between old-fashioned values like gardening and cooking from scratch and modern conveniences that make life easier. Introducing Matrimonial Rolls. This recipe is an oldie. It dates back to the 1940s or 1930s or possibly even earlier. It's the most famous dinner roll recipe you've never heard of. My mom told me that when she was a young girl, that women were judged for their suitability for marriage based on two criteria: the ability to catch, kill, pluck, and cook a chicken, and the lightness of their bread and rolls. Now, matrimonial rolls, so the story goes, can help a girl win a husband. And I'm sure it works the same for guys who like to bake. And if you've already caught your special someone, matrimonial rolls are so good, they might just fall in love with you all over again. They're soft, they're fluffy, they're slightly sweet, they're perfect with any meal. By the way, if you have a Bosch mixer or a KitchenAid mixer, I've created videos specific to those mixers, so you can go right to the video that corresponds with the mixer that is in your kitchen. And if you haven't yet purchased a heavy-duty mixer for bread making, be sure to check out my video, KitchenAid versus Bosch versus Ankarsrum, to help you make the best decision. And if you have friends who are interested in baking, I would really appreciate it if you'd share the links with them too. Now, let's get started. But first, let's talk about the name, Ankarsrum Original Assistant. It's a mouthful, isn't it? So if you want to call it an Ank or an Assistant, that's fine with me. Ingredients for matrimonial rolls include half a cup of melted butter, a cup of milk, 2½ teaspoons of yeast dissolved in a 1/4 cup of warm water, 3 tablespoons of honey, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3 eggs, and about 5 cups of flour. You can use bread flour or all-purpose flour. We're going to use bread flour today. If you like to use whole wheat flour in your matrimonial rolls, you can visit my website, chocolateboxcottage.tv, to get tips for using whole wheat in your matrimonial rolls. And you can also find the printable recipe there. We're going to use the roller and the scraper today, and I want you to visualize these two parts as a pair of hands in the bowl. So the roller is the hand that presses down on the dough, while the scraper is the other hand that lifts and folds the dough. So that's how that works. We drop the scraper into the smaller hole and then center the pin over the hole on the roller, and tension will draw it back over to the side of the bowl. Let's take a quick view of the controls. I placed a piece of tape at the top of each dial to help you see. On the left, we have a combination power on/off and a timer. So to turn it on, turn the dial till on lines up with the arrow until you hear a click. And then to use the timer, continue turning the dial and set for anywhere between 1 to 12 minutes. On the right, we have the speed control. Common practice is to visualize a clock. Low speed is 1 o'clock, and it goes all the way up. 3 or 4 o'clock would be medium, and high speed at 8 o'clock. For bread making, we pretty much stick with between 1 to 3 or 4 o'clock for mixing and for kneading. The butter has been melted in a small saucepan and it's quite warm. I'm going to add the honey directly to the pan, and you don't need to dirty a measuring cup. You can just pour it right out and estimate. If your honey is crystallized, this is a good way to get it melted quickly. Okay. And now let's add the milk. This will help bring the butter down to a temperature that is safe for the yeast. Yes, that feels good. Now we can add this to our mixing bowl. And we can add the yeast, which has been dissolved in water. And now for the eggs. We'll add the salt. And about a cup of flour to start. Now we'll turn the machine on low speed and allow the ingredients to combine. You can use your hand to direct the arm so that the ingredients all get mixed in properly. And give it a minute or so to do the work. Here's where the open bowl design really shines. There's nothing to get in the way of adding flour. So turn the machine to on till you hear the click, and then begin adding flour about half a cup at a time. Give it a little time to incorporate before adding more. And remember, you can always move the arm to help it along if needed. When the dough begins to pull away from the sides of the bowl, that's our cue to stop adding flour. It's a little bit less noticeable with a small batch because we're making a small batch in a big bowl. You can make a double, triple, or quadruple batch of matrimonial rolls in your Ankarsrum. Okay, we're almost there. I'm not going to need all the flour. I'm just going to add another little sprinkle and call it good. Now we're ready to knead. And unlike some mixers that would require you to change from one accessory to another for mixing versus kneading, with the Ankarsrum we start with the roller and scraper and we stay with the roller and scraper. I'm just going to set the machine to knead for about for about 6 minutes. It'll take the same amount of time to knead in your mixer as it will by hand. We can watch the dough develop right in the bowl. The dough is starting to pull away from the sides of the bowl. It still looks shiny and sticky, so this is good. At this point, the mixer's been kneading for about 6 minutes and the dough has come together nicely, so we need to get our hands in the bowl and see how the dough feels. This is important. Even though we're using a mixer to knead the dough, we still need our hands to touch the dough so that we can tell how it's developing. And the best way that I can think of to tell this is by comparing the dough to a Post-it note. So touch the sticky side of a Post-it note and then touch the dough. It should feel really similar. Tacky, but not overly sticky. The dough feels good. Now we can remove the roller and scraper, and I'm going to put the dough on an oiled surface and give it a few turns by hand just to bring it together. So get a little bit of oil on your hands and then give it a few turns by hand. This will really smooth the dough out. See how it's shaped into a nice smooth ball now? That's exactly what we're looking for. And then we'll put it in a buttered bowl. Turn it right side up so the smooth side of the dough is on top, and we'll set it aside and let the dough rise until doubled. The dough's been rising about 45 minutes and it looks like it's doubled. It can be hard to tell though just by looking at it, so we're going to use the poke test. The way to do that is to just take 2 fingers and gently press the dough. You don't want to poke holes into the dough, you just want to gently press the dough and watch the indentations. If the dough springs back towards your fingers, it needs a little more time to rise. Give it about another 10 or 15 minutes. If the dough just slowly or gradually starts to fill in those indentations, then it's just right. If the dough just starts to sigh and want to collapse when you press it, that tells you you let it rise too long. So next time you'll want to give it a shorter rise. So at this point, we will turn the dough out onto my oiled work surface here and use my palms of my hand to deflate it completely. Rather than punching it down, which can tear the dough, I'm just going to use my palms and press all over the dough to flatten it. And then I'm going to give it a few turns by hand to gather it back up into a nice smooth ball and eliminate those big air bubbles. And now this step is optional, but I'm going to put it back into the bowl and give it another rise. So a second in bowl rise. And this will give your matrimonial rolls extra fluff and extra flavor. This second rise will go a little quicker than the first one. So set your timer for about 20 to 25 minutes and come back and check on it. Well, our dough has doubled again. We can do the poke test a second time to give ourselves a little extra practice at that skill. It looks good. Now it's time for the fun part, shaping the rolls. So the first thing I'm going to do is of course turn the dough out onto an oiled surface once again. So I'm getting the dough nice and flat, releasing those air bubbles, and remember that the smooth part of the dough that was on top when it was in the bowl is now underneath touching the table. You always want to keep in mind where the smooth side of the dough is, because eventually we're going to turn that into the top of our rolls. So I got a 9 by 13 inch baking pan ready. It's been generously buttered and it will hold 6 by 4. So we're going to turn this dough into 24 rolls. And since we have such a nice even circle of dough, it makes it quite a bit easier to divide it into evenly shaped pieces. So this first cut is 12. Each half or each quarter makes 6 rolls. Each eighth makes 3 rolls. Now I'm going to show you a couple of ways to shape. Keeping in mind that the smooth side of the dough is on the bottom, you can simply bring up the edges and tuck them underneath, squeezing them together until you have a smooth ball of dough. Let's do that again. Smooth side is on the bottom, so we'll bring up the edges and tuck the edges underneath and pinch them a bit. Another smooth roll. And I'll show you a second way to shape rolls, and that is, once again, you bring up the edges, but then instead of pinching it together, you just bring it over to a smooth surface like a cutting board or a counter, and you just cup your hand over the dough and scoot it towards you, twisting and turning as you go. And there you go. You've got another roll. Okay, let's see that again. We're bringing up the edges, flip it over, and then cup the dough, twist and pull towards you. And there you go, another roll. We've got the last 2 rolls to add to the pan. And now it's time to let it rise. And this is actually the third rise. We gave the dough 2 rises in the bowl, and the third one is now in the pan. So it's going to go pretty quick. We'll have to keep an eye on it. I'll set a timer for about 15 minutes, and in the meantime, I'll have my oven preheating. The rolls are ready to bake. The oven's preheated, and in they go. Now I'll set the timer for about 25 to 30 minutes, and soon we'll have hot, fresh rolls. The rolls baked to a deep golden brown on top and a lighter golden brown underneath, which is just perfect. They look delicious. Now you can serve matrimonial rolls warm from the pan like this, or you can turn them out onto a rack and let them cool. Either way, they're going to be wonderful. Make sure you have some really good jam ready to eat with these. I have a jar of huckleberry lime jam and a jar of apple butter, and I think I'm going to go for the huckleberry lime jam today. Oh, look how that comes apart. Beautiful layers, soft and delicious. Put a little jam in the middle. That is truly wonderful. So delicious. You are going to be proud to serve these to your family and friends. Thank you for joining me in the kitchen today at Chocolate Box Cottage as we made matrimonial rolls in the Ankarsrum Assistant. I hope that this recipe gives you more confidence with your mixer and inspires you to bake more often. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.